Hello everyone, my name is Jory. I'm the Black Medical Anthropologist. Today I'm going to be doing a get ready with me and talking about my medical school journey and what led me to medical anthropology. If you like what you're seeing, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. I'm also not going to be saying the products that I'm using in this video, but they will be listed down below. In kindergarten, I decided that I wanted to be a baby nurse. Like, that's what I told everyone. I didn't quite know what that meant at that time, but I basically meant that I wanted to deliver babies. Over time, I learned the actual term for that. I learned that the term was OBGYN. So that was around middle school that I figured that out. By middle school, I was in math science academies. I was in medical academies. I was excelling in school. Like, honestly, like I've always been like pretty smart and I worked hard. But in high school, I got into some trouble. I actually got suspended in high school, but I think I'm gonna do a whole separate video for that because that's a tale of like the school to prison pipeline. Yeah, that'll be for another day. So when I went to undergrad, I went and got a degree in anthropology. My school like automatically puts you in biology as like your major if you're interested in any kind of medical field. So I learned that we had to take ecology and I was like, I'm not doing that. I can't do that. So I took an anthropology class, fell in love with it, and it was history from there. I needed some time to myself to recover. So I took a gap year and saved some money, traveled, worked as a CNA, applied to medical school, and I got into my dream school. The reason why it was my dream school was because they had a program in integrative medicine, and that was something that I knew that I was interested in. I didn't know what to expect. I don't have anyone in my family who's in medicine. I honestly had spent a lot of time avoiding anything about medicine because like I just didn't want to be anxious. So I joined nd3m, which is like this group that is around like being a minority in medicine, and it's predominantly Black people, but it's open to everyone. So I joined that, and I felt like they really helped me find my way around, find resources, like just give me an inside scoop, and my big helped a lot with that as well. But even though I was like adjusting in some ways, in a lot of ways I wasn't. Like I feel like it was my first time being in the North. I'm very much so a Southern belle. I just like wasn't connected to the area. Like I even talked to some of the deans and I was just like, I don't feel connected to this area. And they were like, you're not alone, but even so, it still was like a bit isolating. And I also experienced a lot of stereotyping. Like I felt like people would tell me like, oh, I don't want to go to the South because I'm afraid of being saying things about my accent and just like a lot of things that I was just like, ew, what's going on? And I've never experienced that before. I also felt like even though I grew up in the South and people stereotype the South as being like racist and things, I felt like I experienced more racism when I moved up north, um, both like anti-Blackness and racism. So yeah, I didn't really have that great of a time. My preclinicals were okay. I felt like I didn't really study as hard as I could have because I was just mentally dealing with a lot. Because of that, I failed like one of my exams, and I was able to make a comeback. Like I talked to the professor, I got some information on how to do better, and like I never failed an exam in preclinicals ever again after that. So like luckily that was just a hiccup. We got to the time to take step one. Step one is like one of the first exams that you have to take, one of the first standardized exams that you have to take as a medical student. I went back home. Like I was like, I'm going home. I'm going to get home cooked meals. So that's what I did. And in the midst of all that, I just was not there. Like I was just not feeling it. Like you're supposed to study for like 10 to 12 hours a day for like 6 days out of the week for like 6 to 8 weeks, and like my brain just does not work like that. I've been diagnosed with ADHD since being in medical school, and like I don't know if that's what it was or what, but like I just like was not, I it just wasn't there. I took one practice exam, I failed it. I never took another one because hit. And so ended up canceling all of that. I must say I was honestly excited. Like I was like very elated to not be taking the exam because like I said, I wasn't even sure if I would have passed it at that point. And I hadn't moved my date. So I kind of saw it as like divine intervention. Like obviously not divine intervention in the sense of like a ton of people died and it was a horrible time and it was very traumatic for a lot of us. But for me, like I was excited not to take the exam. So I spent a lot of that time like getting back into my creative endeavors. I spent a lot of time daydreaming about being an anthropologist with like a tattoo sleeve and like locks. I ended up locking my hair, so I'm like, you know, finding my way to my daydream. But I was like dreaming that I was an anthropologist and like I worked in a library and I was like a violinist on the side. I spent a lot of time away from medicine and I didn't miss it like either. Like people were talking about medical stuff and I was like, yo, I do not care. Like I'm just gonna exit this conversation. That happened. I had a little, you know, I had a little summertime fling and like we went fishing a whole lot and like spent a lot of time having fun and just like reconnecting with nature. Oh, I also decided to make perfume. Like I started to make perfume like homemade. I was inspired by this brand called Posy and her scents are just so beautiful that I was like, let me try to do this myself. To be honest, I left that to her. I was like, you know, do your thing. Like I'm inspired. I'm gonna just continue buying from you. It's like a summertime like hobby. And eventually we had to go back to clinical rotations and that meant that I would be rotating in the hospital with like COVID patients. Luckily my school like did not allow us to see those patients, but you could still see the impact of the pandemic. Like outside of even us like treating these patients, like there was still a huge impact on us because the system was just so stressed out. My first rotation was peds, and I felt like it wasn't that bad. It was pretty chill. I had majority black people, like who were the people treating the patients, and I was in a majority black region. So like that was honestly beautiful to see. Like I was very happy to be seeing that because you just don't always get to see that. That was the first good experience, my first rotation. And then after that, it went downhill. Like it was just everything after that was horrible. I had something wrong in like each rotation, unfortunately. Starting with surgery, I just felt like I did not like the personalities of surgeons. If you know, you know, you know. My camera stopped recording, but what I was saying is that on my first day of surgery, I watched my first patient. I saw her in the morning, and in a couple minutes after seeing her, she coded, and they had to perform CPR on her, and she when I talked to my attending about it, he told us that it was preventable, and that made me feel even worse. And I never really got debriefed on the situation. After that, the rotation was very hard because I felt like we experienced a lot of disrespect from our superiors. And I was very grateful that my next rotation was going to be psychiatry because I had heard that it was a much easier rotation. Psychiatry was known to be a chill rotation. So I was like excited to be having a break. And I had a great time in psychiatry. I did get in trouble. Like I was spending too much time with patients. Like I would be late to rounds because my black patients especially would be like just confiding in me about their trauma and just like I had a hard time walking away. Like I was just like I don't want to walk away from this person when they're telling me all this like hard like information and like them feel abandoned. But unfortunately, that led to me being tardy. Like I wasn't the best psychiatry student, but my patients loved me and I really enjoyed the process. So I was like, I think I'm in love with psychiatry. Like I originally thought I was going to do OBGYN, but after that rotation, I was like, if I don't like the OBGYN rotation, I'm probably going to go into psychiatry. I was experiencing like religious things too. Like I had one patient who me and one of the residents that I worked with, like we used gospel music. It was a black woman. She had a ton of trauma. We used gospel music to get her out of a dissociative episode in which she was like attempting to kill herself. And that happened multiple times during her stay. And I was like helping people make decisions by consulting God and like all these other things that were religious, but like they, you know, I just kind of took that in the back of my mind. Like I didn't really think much of it. OBGYN was horrible. Like I hated OBGYN. that was my next rotation. I got poor evaluations during that rotation too. Honestly, I didn't care. I was going through a lot mentally. I think that's when my grandma got diagnosed with cancer again. And I was dealing with some financial hardship. My car was breaking down and I was getting fines on my car because I lived in the city and like it was broken down and like my mom had it was a lot. So overall, I would say that my experience was riddled with racism, unfortunately, and I witnessed a lot, and like had to process on my own a lot of the times. My most loved rotation was this rotation I had on a geriatric rotation, and we did house calls. I loved that rotation. That is still my mentor to this day. I feel like it was the most integrated care that I had ever seen. And like I said, like I really value integrated medicine. I finished my rotations and it was time for me to study for STEP again. And my head just once again was not in it. I was dealing with my grandma having cancer and like the stress of that. Like I was scheduled to see her after my exam, and honestly I feel like that put a lot of pressure on me and I didn't take it well, um because I was like, oh, I can't move my exam because like I have to see my grandma. I took it, whatever. I did my psychiatric acting internship, which is when you act like you're a first year resident and you rotate on, for me, psychiatry. I rotated in psychiatry as if I was a resident. And once again, religion was the theme of that experience. I learned a lot, but I also saw a lot of things around like patient autonomy. I mean, this was in general when I encountered psychiatric patients, but like around patient autonomy, I wasn't quite sold on the diagnoses that I was giving patients. Like I feel like it didn't sum up enough and it wasn't encompassing enough. And that really bothered me. During that rotation, I ended up finding out that I failed step one, and that was devastating to me. I had been fighting taking a break because I just wanted to be done. Like, I was so annoyed with my medical school experience that I was like, I just want to get through it and like put it in the past. But at that point, I knew that I had to like stop. So I decided to take a break and ended up receiving some bad information around a loan. So I actually had to meet up with my dean and go back to school. So instead of taking a break for 6 months, I ended up just taking like a short break, in which honestly that was good for me because I had injured myself in a foraging accident and I needed time to recover. So that worked out, but I did end up having to go back to my rotations. So I finished up my clinical rotations with the idea that I would be taking step one and step two like after that. Like I would not be enrolled in school. That just made the most financial sense for me. So I did that. I finished my rotations, and then unfortunately I had a friend who I knew from high school who committed suicide, and that was really heartbreaking for me because like I knew that he had struggled with mental health. But I also knew that he was in the medical field. So I just wasn't sure how much, was contributing or like what was the straw that broke the camel's back or whatever. It was just very devastating. And like, luckily I had a friend who was from my high school who I could mourn with. It was another reminder of like how harsh this field can be, and can contribute to your mental health. I finished my rotations, went back home, studied for step one, and like I was in the mindset of like, do I even want to go to residency? Like I was starting to have that mentality of like, I don't know if I actually want to go. During the time that I was studying for step, I was also going to conferences. I went to a conference around psychiatry. I went to one around lifestyle medicine. I like talked to a lot of people. I got mentors. And for the most part, people supported me. Like they were like, you should, like, if that's what you need to do, you should do it. And I had a lot of people echo that they had experience with ideation and mental health problems in medical school, which was validating, but it was also kind of devastating because I was just like, why is this so common? I did all that, and then I took step one, pass, thank God. I took step two, pass, thank God. Very hard. Not going to go into that. Horrible. Horrible time if you talk to anyone who's ever been through that. During that time, I had to fulfill my last research requirement in order to graduate, and I decided to do a literature review about whether or not like we have studied if we incorporate religion into psychiatric care, like what outcomes that has, like specifically amongst Black American communities, because according to the Pew Institute, about 97% of us, at least at the bare minimum, believe in a God. By us, I mean Black people. I was like, well, how are we harnessing this information? Like, are we using it in a helpful way? And what I found was that we weren't. Like, I feel like I only found 3 articles, and they weren't really measuring outcomes in a way that was like good. Like, it was like somewhere just very qualitative data. And so I was just like, this is a gap in the research. I knew that I had a passion for mental health. And so I was like, I think this is the route that I'm going to go. Like, this is a combination of anthropology and medicine. Those are 2 passions that I have. I basically want to move forward, fill that data gap, because the research is currently not there. So yeah, that's like where I'm at now. I'm in the process of figuring out how exactly I want to do that, like how exactly I want to fill that gap. But as of right now, that's where I'm at. There's a lot that I didn't say. There's a lot that I went through that just didn't get put into this Get Ready With Me. I may make videos on them later. I hope that my journey has helped you guys, like, you know, feel validated if you're in a similar position, or feel like you have some more insight if you are thinking about going into this field, or at least just, you know, get some insight as to what your doctors are going through. If you have any similar experiences, I would love to hear them in the comments. I'm gonna go and come back and show you guys my finished look.
When I look back at my medical school experience, I realize I had depression. Though I attempted to treat it with SSRIs and therapy, what helped the most were those moments away from the field. I couldn't ignore my body and mind telling me that this field was bad for me. I felt I had experienced a lot of trauma, but that my trauma wasn't necessarily unique in this field. I experienced a lot of moral injury treating psychiatric patients whose illnesses had much more to do with systemic issues. It also concerned me that cultural considerations were not comprehensive enough in the diagnosing criteria. I also felt more research is needed to feel secure working in the field of psychiatry, as a lot of the medications can cause harm. Recently, the largest meta-analysis declaring the effects of SSRIs are more effective than placebo has been critiqued for its biases and lack of acknowledging high study dropout rates. I decided I had already seen enough, and that continuing a traditional path of medicine would be a self-sacrifice I wasn't willing to make. I may revisit the idea of residency later in my journey, but for now, I am enrolling in a master's program to find ways to create equitable outcomes for Black American psychiatric patients.
All right, this is the finished look. I hope you like it. I had a lot of fun making this video. Thank you for watching. If you have any suggestions for further videos in the future, please let me know. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Bye.